spirituality in the quantum realm. You've probably seen this slide before. Just going to read the things it says underneath it. Mystics understand the roots of the Tao, but not its branches. Scientists understand its branches, but not its roots. Science does not need mysticism, and mysticism doesn't need science, but humankind needs both. Now that, if you like, is the kind of mission statement of this afternoon. And you can see the illustrations, the famous 1928 Solvay conference, which basically changed everything, because all these high flyers in physics, Einstein's there in the middle, De Broglie, lots of others who are well known now, are there, and basically they agreed that physics couldn't carry on like it had, and that something really unusual was coming out in terms of the latest research that was being done. On the right, of course, we've got Yggdrasil, the Norse ash tree, the world ash tree, and I thought that was a nice one to put in about the roots and the branches to bring the two together into a single whole. Right, we start with disclaimers. All right, now I know some people who are here today, some I don't know. I know that some of us here today came first to the things to be covered in this session by a scientific route. You read stuff, studied stuff, and so on, and you came to understand something of what quantum mechanics involves. Others by a mystical route, and that could have taken many, many different forms. Now, if it's the first time for anyone, it could involve seeing life, the universe, and everything in a very different way. So that's a disclaimer. The kind of thing, like when you look at the night sky and you get Copernicus. Okay, I'll try. Okay, that should do. When you first look at the night sky with the eyes of Copernicus, right? You see the sunset, and let's say Venus is very clear, all right? My dad was a navigator in the RAF in the war, and he taught me the stars and the planets. But he never taught me Copernicus, so I knew where Venus was and Saturn and all that kind of stuff. And I just saw it in the sky, yeah, okay. Then I discovered Copernicus, like you do, that in fact the Earth is not the centre of all things, the Sun is, and these planets are not going around the Earth, really, they're going around the Sun, really. So, you watch the sun set, and Venus is very bright, so you can see Venus, the sun sets, and you know where the sun's gone, down below the sea, and you think, hey, that planet out there is closer to the sun than I am, and it's going around the sun, and we're going around the sun too. Have you had a Copernicus moment? If you have, would you wave a hand? Okay. So you know, you never see the night sky the same after that, do you? There could be a Copernicus moment this afternoon. Okay? If you're new to some of these things, either from the mystical angle or from the scientific angle, then there could be a Copernicus moment. And then a question, don't want the answer now, you'll see why later on. Why doesn't the BBC use its regular presenters to read the shipping forecast? It would save money, wouldn't it? You know, so much easier. Nice little slide here. Embryo on one hand, or fetus on the one hand. Some maths, and what do you call it, a galaxy? I don't know. But we notice that they all have the same kind of shape. And that is a kind of image, I suggest, that you hold in your mind, because what we're going to be saying basically this afternoon is, from a number of points of view, we and the world out there, as we might call it, we and the world out there share in a single reality. Now that's what mystics have been saying for millennia. That's what, since 1928, scientists who are halfway clued up have been realising. And that I put up there as an image for you. I mentioned maths. We won't do too much maths, but it's an important part of what we're doing. You could say maths is a kind of intellectual mysticism, in that it's not to do with the world of the five senses. It's an internal thing. Pure maths and the kind of research that people do in that is an internal thing. But time and time again, pure maths, stuff that just started in somebody's mind, has been found to be a feature of the world. Perhaps not at the obvious five senses level, but when you go deeper into it, that it's part of the way the world is. And that is another illustration of how there is no world beyond us. We are part of one world. The inner world, the outer world, they're all one. If you go down to a deep level. Right, some slogans. Now, this gives you some idea of the breadth of this one. And I've got to say, I'm ever so sorry, but there's no way we're going to cover all of this. But you deserve to see something of the breadth of this subject. And of course, you'll have opportunity to explore it further with the reading list, and if you want to, in conjunction with me. Quite a few people from this group are in touch with me one way and another, and insofar as I can, I will give you the time. Let's try the first one. Observation collapses the wave function. These are just slogans at the moment, but we will unpack most of them. Now, I put up the pragmatic spirituality. If just looking at something or just seeing something changes it, then that's causing something to happen in the world. So, pragmatic spirituality is spirituality that isn't just in your mind and takes you somewhere on a high, but it's something that changes stuff that isn't you. All right? Participation. This is a word we'll use a great deal. A guy called John Archibald Wheeler was the first one to use the word participator. And this was, he lived a long time, this was his way of summing up what was reluctantly agreed on at the Solvay conference, that basically you cannot do an experiment and stand apart from it. You and the experiment are part of a single whole at a very deep level. And if you're doing stuff with particles, that's very deep. And you cannot stand apart. So it's not the experimenter anymore, it's the participator. Because observe the experiment, and you will be interfering with it, collapsing the wave function. I promise you more on that later. The joined-upness of everything. Not very good English, but I can't do any better than that. I haven't found any better than that. But everything, if quantum mechanics is true, is joined up. Everything but everything. And there's a lovely illustration we look at later on, Indra's web, all right? But that's a picture which will help on that. Ecology. We won't do any ecology this afternoon, but it's a feature of this joined-upness of everything. Not just food chains and that kind of thing, but down at the absolute rock bottom level, things being joined up. Non-locality. At that level you cannot say there's no here or there. Won't go any further in that. Non-dualism. Oh, well, it's mind over matter. Mind and matter were seen for a long time as being separate kind of things, substances, stuff. Blame it on René Descartes. All right? A lot of good science got done on the basis of that. But in 1928, people had to say, we can't distinguish between the two when we get down to a deep level. So, are we saying everything is just one? No, because it isn't, is it? But we are saying, don't go for a dualism of mind and matter. So non-dualism is not monism, which is everything is one, right? Which some people believe, especially when they're smoking something. But but non-dualism is saying, okay, this is a mystery, but one thing's for sure, we're not going to go for dualisms. It's this or that. Holographic principle, oh my, I'd love to do this one in detail. You know about a hologram, say you've got a hologram pendant, you break it. You know that you don't lose the image. The image is there in both pieces, all right? And the holographic principle is something that has been used increasingly in the latter part of the 20th century and the 21st century to view the way that the universe is. I won't go into lots of detail because it goes beyond me in the science, but it's part of the territory here. Entanglement. This is a big word. And Einstein's spooky action at a distance, when he observed things that were happening and didn't know quite why, and relativity didn't really solve the problems, he called it spooky action at a distance, only it happened faster than the speed of light. Why? Because thing of non-locality. Something happens here and something happens at the same time over there. Only there is no here and there. They're entangled at a deep level. Sounds crazy, but lots of this is. Oh dear. Come on, baby. Ah, thank you. Right. It from bit. This is the big one. It is basically the way things are. Right? The universe, the cosmos. Bit is information. It's John Archibald Wheeler's slogan. It from bit. We'll cover this in lots of detail. Bit is non-physical and can be personal. We will explore that a bit later on. Everything is information. That's John Archibald Wheeler again. At rock bottom, everything is information. You'll find in many universities there's a professor of quantum information. Right? So it's taken very seriously. The Logos. That could be from Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius, or it could be from the New Testament. The beginning of St. John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, in the beginning was the Logos. That's information, all right? Mind is the matrix of all matter. That was said by a guy called Max Planck, who lived a long time, and he's one of the pioneers. I don't know if he was at Solvay, but people knew about him there. So, he says mind is what brings about all things. And he was a hard-headed scientist. We'll read some of his stuff a bit later on. So maths is mind. We talked about how maths gets discovered in the mind, and then we find it's there in the external world. Just an instance would be Descartes in the 17th century mocked mathematicians who tried to do maths using what he called imaginary numbers, like the square root of -1. He said, well, this is nonsense. But come the 19th century, you use the square root of -1 with other numbers to make complex numbers, and those help you do the equations for alternating current, which was not around when René Descartes was pontificating. So that's one instance of how maths is, if you like, maths is in the mind, and matter is hitched up to that. Right. Consciousness, we will look at the main model for consciousness. This is Penrose and Hameroff, Roger Penrose, isn't it? We'll look at that later on. But consciousness is, at the quantum level, is where it happens, according to Penrose and Hameroff. And then, what's the last one? Oh yes, the square root of -1 does appear to play a fundamental role in the working of the universe. That's Roger Penrose. Again, brilliant mathematician and physicist. Wow, that's I've done a lot of talking there, but that's just giving you some idea of what the field is. We'll slow down now. Now, three things today where we find that science and mysticism are entangled. It from bit includes the deeply personal. What is unfolding in us was first enfolded in information. We look at a picture of an ovum and sperm, right? They become an embryo. and that unfolds to become you and me, all right? So what is enfolding in us was first enfolded in information, in DNA carried by the sperm and carried by the ovum, okay? And the little quote I give you there, we do not come into this world, we come out of it, right? We arise from the way the world is. Okay, you could, you mothers, you could say, well, yeah, I know, you know what it means for someone to come into the world. Fair enough. That's at the five senses level. But remember, we're talking about the very, very deep quantum level. Second one, that of God in everyone is bringing to being and sustaining a participatory universe. The phrase, that of God in anyone, if you're familiar with that, would you wave a hand? Right, where does it come from, somebody?
Quaker belief.
Quakers, that's right, George Fox, okay? He spoke of that of God in everyone, okay? Think about it for a moment. And we're not presupposing any belief or anything like that, but if we're talking about a mind, or mind being the matrix of all matter, you can pretty well say mind equals God, or if you like, mind equals G-D, okay, to be unspecific about it. Well, if there is that of God in everyone, and many people believe that, then that is part of what is sustaining a universe in which we are participators. Bit of a mind blower. And the third one, the movement from implicate to explicate is one, fundamental to being, and two, grounded in information. Right? Implicate. Your parents. Right? Implicate in your father and in your mother was enough bits of DNA. But as they stood, they were not necessarily going to come into anything. But the implicate, what was implicate in the sperm and in the ovum that finally met up with to become you and me, became explicate in you as a fetus and being born and so on. Now this is one of the fundamental models of quantum mechanics. We'll cover it in a little bit later. The name is David Bohm, and his famous book, Wholeness and the Implicate Order, is one of those that we'll be referring to. Okay? Right, nice little picture here on the mystical side. Right? The slogan, if you like, thou art that, I won't try to pronounce the Sanskrit, comes from one of the Upanishads, which are the holy books of Hinduism, basically more philosophical than the Vedas, which are the ancient books of the Hindus. If you like, the Vedas are the Old Testament, and the Upanishads are the New Testament for Hindus. And in the sixth one, the Chandogya Upanishad, a father is instructing his son, and he shows the world to his son, and the world's out there, and all the rest of it. And the son, he says to the son, you are that. Bit of a mind blower, but it was around 6 centuries before our common era. And there you've got the Solvay Conference. Right, quarter to 3. Max Planck, 1858 to 1947. Lived a long time, but he, in many ways, was a pioneer. And he, as a hard-headed scientist, says, mind is the matrix of all matter. Now you can map that onto the Chandogya Upanishad, all right? Mind is the same as Atman, which is the nearest you've got in sort of general European terms is soul, your inner being, all right? Brahman, the nearest you've got in European terms is God, the matrix of all matter. God is everything as far as a Hindu is concerned. So that's mapping Max Planck onto the Upanishads. Now, this is the participatory universe. Here we have George Fox saying, walk cheerfully over all the world, answering that of God in everyone. That's where this phrase comes from. Well, he's saying basically the same as the Father to the Son in the Upanishad. In everyone you will find God. In yourself you will find God. But God, as the sustainer of all, the creator and sustainer of all things, he and you are, in a sense, one and the same. You are part of him. Now this, we have no time to go into in any detail, but this is a nice slide and you can peruse it when you've got the PowerPoint. You can peruse it. But basically, what we have here is what's down there. I'll read what it says. I'm going to sit down for this. The human brain is packed with cells called neurons that connect via networks of axons and dendrites. These pass signals across minute spaces called synaptic gaps. The classical view says thought is born from these connections between neurons, and nobody has got a decent theory of consciousness from that over a long time. The Penrose-Hameroff theory, which is known as the OR, or the orchestrated objective reduction, on the other hand, suggests that consciousness originates from quantum interactions in the microtubules inside each cell. Now, every cell in our body has got microtubules in it. They're sort of the skeleton or what hold the stuff that gives strength to the cell. And that's Penrose and Hameroff, that's their theory, which is taken seriously. That's not mine, is it? Good. Right, let's move on to that speedily. There's Penrose and Hameroff, handsome people. Now, mind and body have seemed to be very distinct and different in Western thought. Blame it on Descartes. But increasingly quantum mechanics is being seen as having a significant role in human thought and consciousness. According to Penrose and Hameroff, activity inside the neuron at the level of microtubules, part of the structure of all cells, could be housing the quantum happenings which produce consciousness. So quantum happenings are weird, very small, to do with the wave function, more of that later, but this is how mind and the physical world are seen at this level as being one, and that of course is a very mystical insight too. If that's the case, if QM is the source of consciousness, then it supports Planck's assertion that mind is the matrix of all matter. It also solves the mind-body problem. You may remember in this very room we did a session on the mind-body problem and looked at some of the ways in which in the 21st century people are looking at ways of solving it. That basically, how does our mind join up with our body? I want to raise my hand, why does my hand do it? You know, things like that. So it solves that problem, and it also supports that our relationship with the cosmos. When the line between myself and what happens to me is dissolved, I find myself not in a world, but as a world, part of the world, at that deep level. A few bits of crazy English now. The plain everythingness of everything. The plain everythingness of everything in cahoots with the everythingness of everything else. That's a quote from Lady Diane Ackerman, more later on. But here is something a bit more poetic perhaps. As if you were a leaf blown along by the wind, until you realise that you are both the leaf and the wind. The world outside your skin is just as much you as the world inside. They move together inseparably. Remember, at this deep level. But this is something, again, that mystics have been saying for millennia. We'll skip that one quickly. Here's a very quick sort of view of the movement of ideas in science. non-dualism in science. Dualism you get with Descartes, Galileo, Newton, Leibniz, Gassendi, people like that, who relied on distinction. There's this and there's that. Observer, experiment. We move in analysis. Well, there's this in it and that and the other thing, and that makes up a whole dissection. We want to find out about what a human body is. So cut it up, find out the little bits, see how they fit together. Identification, lists, whether it's a species or whether it's the periodic table, that's the way to find out about things. And categorization. Mind and matter are different and separate substances. Come the 19th century, it ain't so simple. Because you have things, well, you have the thermodynamics and electromagnetism. You have things like a magnetic field, very real, and it can have some very powerful effects. But where does it stop? Where does it start? Yeah? You know, it just fades off until it's imperceptible. It doesn't mean it's stopped. It just means we can't perceive it or our instruments can't pick it up. And the transformation of energy. That energy is constant. You just transform it from one thing into another. And so energy is not so simple to talk about as people might have thought at one stage. And then the Solvay conference. The transformation of matter and energy. Not just one kind of energy into another, like say with a steam engine, you heave in your coal, get heat, get steam, and you get kinetic energy with the train. Now, matter and energy equal E equals mc squared, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you know the story. The interaction of observer and the experiment at the subatomic level. So, non-dualism becomes very much part of science as far as the physicists are concerned. But I don't know about you when you were at school. I didn't do much science at school, but an awful lot of, I taught secondary for 30 years, and an awful lot of the guys who were teaching physics and so on, they were teaching Newtonian physics as though that was all there was, and in their minds, when I taught with them, that was all there was. Okay? It takes a while for new ideas, especially radical ones, like quantum mechanics and the stuff at the Solvay conference, to get through. Now, observation collapses the wave function. You notice observation there has got a star by it. At the bottom, I say by inner observation, meditation, or by outer, in the laboratory, inverted commas, seeing. There are different kinds of seeing. And here I offer you a thought of what happens in meditation. That what one may learn and understand in meditation. If Penrose and Hameroff are right about consciousness being a quantum phenomenon, then what you see there is observation collapsing the wave function and making a sense inside your mind that you hadn't seen before. Interestingly, a lot of the scientists who are famous, David Bohm, Einstein, Wolfgang Pauli, they deliberately sought out mystics to dialogue with. David Bohm, Krishnamurti, Einstein with Rabindranath Tagore, Pauli with C.G. Jung. They were aware of this mystical dimension. And so Capra, Fritjof Capra, who we will be studying more of later on, says the mystic and the physicist arrive at the same conclusion, one starting from the inner realm, the other from the outer world. The harmony between their views confirms the ancient Indian wisdom that Brahman, the ultimate reality without, is identical to Atman, the reality within. Right, let's see what we've got next. That is a good place for us to pick up after the break.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to have a short break. How many people want tea? You put your hands up. Janice, can you count the tea?